Now we are going to learn what is the corpus callosum, the different parts of the corpus callosum, like the genu, the body, the rostrum, etc. as the splenium, and then also how to correlate that with what is called as the forceps minor, forceps major, etc. So what you are seeing in this image now is a different sequence of MRI image. It's called an FA map, that is called the fractional anisotropy map. I'm not going to the details of that, but what you are seeing here are the corpus callosum fibers that are crossing from one side of the brain to the other side of the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, one cerebral hemisphere to the other cerebral hemisphere. So since it is crossing the brain like this, it is having a red color over here in that FA map. So these are the different parts of the corpus callosum. For example, this is the anterior aspect of the corpus callosum. That is where you have the genu. Okay, this is called the genu of the corpus callosum. This is called the rostrum of the corpus callosum. This is called the body of the corpus callosum, and this posterior aspect is called the splenium of the corpus callosum. And in between that you can have a slight depression, a slight indentation, that is called the isthmus. So let me name these structures in sequentially. Here you have the rostrum curves on the genu then curves here. This is called the body of the corpus callosum. Then it forms a narrowing, it is called isthmus, and then finally the splenium. Okay, these are the different structures of the corpus callosum. Now, as I told before, these are basically huge number of fibers that are crossing from one part of the cerebral hemisphere through this corpus callosum through this red colored structure, okay, that is a midline section of the corpus callosum, to the opposite side, to the corresponding region on the opposite side. These are called commissural fibers. So all of these are commissural fibers. So if you consider this area, okay, this area, and if I try to find out which that group of fibers are, if I focus on this area and I am selecting that group of fibers, okay, these are the group of fibers that crosses through it. See, these entire fibers are mapped out by a technique called tractography. So in this tractography image, you can see all these fibers are actually crossing from one side to the other side through that genu of the corpus callosum. Earlier we saw the genu of the corpus callosum. That genu of the corpus callosum is allowing the passage of fibers from one side of the hemisphere through the genu onto the opposite side. It looks at very intricate structure, okay, very intricate structure, a bundle of fibers connecting one side of the cerebral hemisphere in the frontal lobe to the other side of the cerebral hemisphere in the frontal lobe. As you can see here, this is basically the frontal lobe. I can bring back the whole white matter a little bit to make that evident. Okay, this is the frontal lobe of the brain. So it is basically the frontal lobes of both sides are communicated through these fibers, the forceps minor fibers, through the genu of the corpus callosum onto the other side. So this is what is happening over here. Okay, so I'll just hide this group of fibers here. Now I'll move this and I'll try to find out what are the fibers going through the splenium. Okay, through the splenium, these are the fibers that goes through the splenium. That green one, that is the fibers that are connecting both the occipital lobes. There you have the occipital lobes. The occipital lobes are connecting to a massive amount of fibers that goes through the splenium to the opposite side. Okay, that is the splenium. Again, I'll just bring back the white matter to make that evident. Okay, this is the white matter. I'll reduce the opacity of the white matter. You can understand how the splenial fibers are basically the forceps major. These group of fibers are called forceps major. You can see a huge U that is formed from the occipital pole of one side to the occipital pole of the other side. That is why it is called forceps major. If I compare that with the forceps minor, if I compare that with the forceps minor, the forceps minor is a smaller forceps if you compare with the forceps major. Major is quite larger because the distance from the splenium to the occipital pole is much higher than from the genu to the frontal pole. That's why it is called forceps minor and this is called forceps major. Okay, so you understood forceps minor and forceps major, and similarly you have other groups of the corpus callosum. This is called the tapetal fibers. The tapetal fibers will be sweeping around on the lateral aspect of the inferior horn and the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. This orange colored fibers, that is the tapetal fibers. Okay, that is the tapetal fibers, and then the body of the corpus callosum is over here. So this is the corpus callosum in its whole magnanimity. It's almost like this. It is so enormous, it is so complex, so that we can't learn, if you dissect the whole corpus callosum, we can't learn the different parts of it, because it is very, very complex. That's why we go very simply into this median section, and you can understand the different parts of the corpus callosum as a very simple structure, like for rostrum, genu, the body, the isthmus, and the splenium. But actually it is very complex, having this much number of fibers passing through it: the fossus minor, fossus major, tapetum, and the body of the corpus callosum, formed by this number of fibers. So this is the largest commissural fiber present in the brain. The other minor commissural fibers are the anterior commissure, the posterior commissure, the habenular commissure, commissure of the fornix. They are all minor commissure when you compared with this. This is a huge huge number of fibers connecting the both sides of the cerebral hemispheres.